She stood at that podium and told the whole room I needed to apologize to her. 200 people watching. My husband right there, nodding like a man who had already made up his mind. I did not argue, did not explain myself. I just said, all right, picked up my things and walked out on steady heels. He thought that was the end of it. Bless his heart. At midnight that same day, every single system he had built his company on, every server, every client portal, every access badge in the building went dark. Not crashed, not corrupted, just locked. And the only key was in my name.
If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. I need you to understand something before I tell you how it fell apart. 7 years ago, TerraCore Technologies did not exist. It was just Damon's half-finished idea and my code. That is the truth, and I have spent a long time learning not to soften it. We started in a 2-bedroom apartment in Decatur, one of those places where the upstairs neighbors moved furniture at midnight and the kitchen faucet dripped, no matter how many times you called the landlord. Damon had the vision, the business school contacts, the ability to walk into a room full of skeptical investors and make them feel like they were being let in on something. I had the technical foundation. I could actually build the things he described. We would sit at the kitchen table after dinner, laptops open, takeout boxes pushed to the side. He would sketch ideas on a legal pad. I would write the code. He would charm the money. I would make the product work. It felt like partnership. For a while, it was. When we incorporated, Damon became CEO. I became CTO. He took the corner office with the view of Peachtree Street. I took the workspace near the server room where the vents ran too loud and the fluorescent lights buzzed like something trapped. But I told myself it was fine. We were building something together. We were married. That was supposed to mean something. For a few years, it did. My name is Dominique Carter. Most people call me Nikki. I am 38 years old. I am a systems architect and a co-founder, though you would not have known it from the TerraCore company website, which listed Damon as founder and visionary and buried my name somewhere in the team section between 2 junior engineers. I am not telling you this to complain. I am telling you because you need to know where I started so you understand what it cost me to get out. The erasure did not happen all at once. That is what makes it hard to explain to people who have never lived through it. It started small. Damon stopped introducing me as his co-founder at industry dinners. I became our lead developer. At the Atlanta Tech Summit 2 years in, I was part of the team. At the Series B closing celebration, investors shook his hand for 20 minutes straight, and their eyes slid right past me like I was standing behind tinted glass. I told myself it was the industry. Women in tech learn early that the room was not built for them. You swallow it, you smile, you keep building. But it was not just the industry. It was deliberate. I see that clearly now. At the time, I kept finding reasons to explain it away. Damon is the public face. That is just how it works. He does not mean anything by it. The excuses piled up the same way the overtime did, quietly, invisibly, until the weight of them became my normal. By the time TerraCore had 50 employees and a midtown office with floor-to-ceiling windows and a rooftop deck where they held quarterly all-hands meetings, I had been reduced to a technical resource, present but not visible, essential but not acknowledged. I started keeping notes, not obsessively, just a private document on an encrypted drive, dates, incidents, exact wording of who said what, not because I knew I would need it, more because writing it down kept me from convincing myself I was imagining things. That document would later be worth more than everything in our joint bank account. 6 months before everything collapsed, the board announced that Camille Reeves had been hired as Chief Innovation Officer. Damon told me at dinner. He would not quite meet my eyes, said it was the board's call, said her network was valuable, said it was not personal. What he did not say, what I found out 3 weeks later from our CFO, who had one too many glasses of scotch at a company happy hour, was that Camille had come in with leverage, not illegal leverage, just the kind that is worse to ignore than to accommodate. She had history with 2 board members from her consulting days. Nothing criminal, just embarrassing enough that saying no to her felt riskier than saying yes. She had positioned herself perfectly. The board caved. And now she was going to be my colleague. I had heard Damon mention Camille exactly twice in 7 years. Both times his jaw tightened and he changed the subject. I had filed that away without examining it too closely. Her first week at TerraCore, she held a staff introduction in the main conference room. She walked in wearing a steel gray wrap dress and heels that probably cost more than my first car. Dark hair swept back, a smile that was warm and practiced and landed differently depending on who she was aiming it at. When her eyes found me, she extended her hand and said, "You must be Damon's wife. Not Nikki, not the CTO, not the co-founder. Damon's wife." I shook her hand. Her grip was firm enough to seem professional and quick enough to say she had already decided I did not matter. I smiled back. I did not say a word. That was the first time I thought, this is not going to be accidental. This is going to be deliberate. I was right. Over the following weeks, Camille made her presence felt everywhere. She showed up to technical architecture reviews she had no business attending. She interrupted my explanations mid-sentence to offer buzzword-heavy suggestions that sounded impressive and meant nothing. She smiled at Damon after contradicting me, and he would nod thoughtfully, like she had just said something worth considering. But that was not the part that made my blood run cold. What made my blood run cold was when she started presenting my ideas. Concepts I had sketched out in internal working documents, approaches I had raised in team meetings 6 months earlier. She would repackage them with trendy language, agile threat postures, dynamic resilience frameworks, and present them to the board like she had invented them over the weekend. And Damon would sit there saying nothing, not backing her up exactly, not defending me, just looking slightly past me, out the window, waiting for the moment to pass. The first time it happened, I thought I had misheard. The second time, I went back and checked my files. The timestamps were right there, my drafts, my language, my architecture, dated months before Camille arrived. I did not say anything yet. I started documenting instead. I copied every relevant file to the encrypted backup drive at my private office suite near the airport, a small space I had rented quietly 3 years earlier and registered under ClearPath Security Consulting, LLC. Damon did not know the LLC existed. He thought it was a hobby workspace. He had nodded when I mentioned it once and gone back to his phone. I was not planning anything yet. I was just protecting myself. That is what I told myself anyway. The thing that finally made me understand how serious this was happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was reviewing licensing paperwork for a new client integration when I came across a provisional patent application filed with the USPTO 3 weeks earlier. Inventor listed Camille R. Reeves. Technology described an adaptive threat response framework for distributed security environments. I sat in my chair and read that description twice. That was my framework. I had built it over 18 months starting in 2021. I had documentation going back to the first design meeting, whiteboard photos, version-controlled drafts, time-stamped commits in the code repository. There was a paper trail 2 inches thick that showed exactly where every idea had come from, and she had filed a patent on it with her name on it. 3 days later, in a client presentation, Camille stood up and described the adaptive encryption model to a room full of executives from a Fortune 500 company. She gestured at the slides and said, "This innovative approach is something I have been developing over the past year." I waited until the clients left. I kept my voice even. I said, "Actually, that framework is based on architecture I developed and documented in 2021. The timestamps are on file." Damon was standing right there. He watched Camille's face flush. He watched her stumble for a response. He watched her look at him for help. And then he looked at me like I had done something unforgivable. Not her. Me. I drove home that night with both hands tight on the wheel and the radio off. I had known for months that something was wrong. I had not understood until that moment how wrong. I pulled up the original operating agreement when I got home. I had not read Section 11, subsection C in years, but I had written it. I had insisted on it at incorporation, told Damon it was standard protection for technical founders in case the company ever went through a hostile acquisition or a board restructuring. He had shrugged and signed. His lawyer, a fraternity brother from business school, had skimmed it and said it looked reasonable. I read it 3 times that night. Then I set the document down and thought for a very long time. I was not planning revenge. I was calculating exposure. There is a difference. The suspension happened on a Wednesday. I dressed carefully that morning. Navy blazer, white blouse, my good heels, the ones that made a particular sound on marble floors that I have always found steadying. I drove to the office thinking we had a quarterly review on the agenda. I walked into the conference room and felt immediately that something was wrong. The air was different, too still. 200 employees seated in rows. Damon at the podium, posture too deliberate. Camille in the front row with her legs crossed, examining her nails. My assistant Kezia caught my eye from across the room and looked away too fast. That is when I knew. Damon's voice cut through the room. Before we get to Q3 results, I need to address a personnel matter. He looked directly at me. 200 heads turned. I felt the floor drop out from under me, not from fear, from the sheer clarity of finally understanding. This was the move. This was what everything had been building toward. "It has come to my attention," he said in the careful, practiced tone of a man who had rehearsed this, "that unprofessional conduct in our development division has created a hostile work environment. Effective immediately, Nikki Carter is suspended from all active projects pending a formal apology to Camille Reeves." The room went up in whispers. Chairs scraped. Someone near the back actually gasped. My face was burning, not from shame, from fury so concentrated it felt physical. I had not yelled at Camille. I had not made a scene. I had corrected the record in a client meeting with documented evidence. He was publicly punishing me for that in front of every person I had hired, mentored, and spent 7 years building something with. I wanted to stand up and lay it all out. The timestamps, the patent filing, the original architecture documents, 7 years of evidence. I did not do any of that. I smiled, small, controlled. The kind of smile that does not reach your eyes. "All right," I said, 1 breath, 2 words. "Final." The whispers stopped dead. Damon's expression shifted. Confusion first, then something close to irritation. He had staged this whole performance expecting resistance, tears, an outburst he could point to. I gave him none of it. I stood slowly, picked up my tablet, and walked toward the exit. My heels clicked against the marble floor, steady and even, like a metronome counting down. Behind me, I heard someone whisper, "She is not even fighting back." I heard Camille's quiet laugh. Soft and satisfied, I kept walking. I did not go home. I drove to the building near the airport. Gray exterior, nothing on the marquee except suite numbers. 3rd floor, suite 312. The door had a frosted glass panel that said ClearPath Security Consulting, LLC, in small letters. I had designed it that way on purpose. Visible if you knew what you were looking for, invisible if you did not. I sat down at the desk, booted the secure server, and pulled up the operating agreement. Section 11, subsection C. The language was technical and deliberately understated, buried on page 9 of a 22-page document. In plain terms, it said this: "If I were ever suspended or terminated without documented cause through proper arbitration proceedings, all proprietary technology I had personally developed would immediately revert to my ownership. TerraCore would retain a temporary operating license, but would be required to renegotiate full terms within 30 days. Today was Wednesday. That gave Damon until midnight to provide documented cause through the correct legal channel. He had no documented cause. What he had was Camille's ego and his own cowardice. I opened my laptop and went to work. Every core system at TerraCore, the security protocols, the client database architecture, the encryption frameworks, the access management infrastructure. Ran through authentication servers I had personally configured over 7 years. I did not delete anything. I did not corrupt a single file. I transferred ownership and authentication authority to ClearPath Security Consulting, LLC. At 6 in the afternoon, I set the access revocation to trigger at 12:01. Then I locked the office, drove home, and started making dinner. I made jerk chicken. Put on an old Lala Hathaway album. Let the apartment fill up with something that smelled like home. Damon came in around 9, tie loose, jacket over his arm, the particular look of a man who felt he had handled something difficult and could finally relax. He kissed my forehead without looking at me and went straight to his phone. "Long day," he said. "Leadership always is," I said, stirring the rice. He sat at the counter and scrolled. I set a plate in front of him. What I did not know yet was that earlier that afternoon, a junior IT engineer named Terrence, one of my hires, sharp kid, maybe 24, had sent a message to Camille. He had been running routine diagnostics and noticed that several authentication tokens were set to expire at midnight. He flagged it to her, thinking something might be misconfigured. Camille told him he was probably looking at a scheduled maintenance window, told him to stop worrying about back-end operations that were not in his lane, told him to log off for the evening. He did. I did not find out about Terrence's message until a week later. When I did, I sat very still for a minute thinking about how thin the margin had been. One person who took the message seriously, one supervisor who actually read it, and the whole thing unravels before it starts. But Camille had dismissed him because she was confident. Because she had no idea how deep the preparation went, because she had never once taken me seriously, and so she could not imagine that the thing she was dismissing was real. That is the thing about being underestimated for long enough. Eventually, people stopped checking. We ate dinner mostly in silence. Damon scrolled his email between bites. I sipped water and thought about access tokens and the specific beauty of well-written automation. He fell asleep before 10:30. I lay awake and watched the clock. 11:47, 11:52, 11:58. At 12:01, I finally closed my eyes. Somewhere in a server facility on the south side of Atlanta, automated processes began running. Access tokens expired. Authentication requests failed. Security badges stopped returning valid signals. Client portals, the ones where TerraCore's financial services customers checked their portfolio security dashboards every morning, displayed a clean, polite message: license invalid. Please contact ClearPath Security Consulting, LLC for authorization. I imagine the overnight IT team's panic. The calls up the chain, the reboots that fixed nothing, the diagnostics that pointed to a licensing error no one could trace. The growing, terrible understanding that this was not a system crash. The system was working exactly as designed. It just did not belong to them anymore. By the time I got up at 5:45 to make real coffee, ground beans, French press, 4-minute steep, my phone had 31 missed calls. I watched the count climb while the kettle boiled. I stood at the kitchen window and watched the sky turn from dark blue to gray. A delivery truck rumbled past. A man walked his dog with the particular patience of someone who woke up too early every day and had made peace with it. 15 blocks away, a $200 million company was quietly suffocating. I poured my coffee, added cream until it hit the right shade of caramel, and took the first sip. It was perfect. Damon stumbled into the kitchen at 7:15, hair still pressed from the pillow, wearing the old Morehouse t-shirt he had owned since before I knew him. He reached for his phone from the charging dock. I watched his face change. The sleepy, unfocused look dropped away. His eyes sharpened. His thumbs scrolled fast, then faster. When he looked up at me, there was something in his expression I had not seen there before. "What is going on?" His voice was careful. He was trying to stay measured. "Good morning," I said. "The systems are all down. Every access badge, the client portal, everything. IT is saying there's some kind of licensing error, but that doesn't... He stopped. Nikki, what did you do? It was not really a question. You should call Pamela, I said. She can explain it better than I can. Pamela Osi was TerraCore's corporate attorney. I had called her at 6 that morning and explained the clause. She had gone very quiet. Then she had said, "Send me the operating agreement." I sent it. 20 minutes later, she called back and said, "I am going to need a few hours." Damon called her immediately. I heard fragments from across the kitchen, his voice rising, then dropping, then going very still. He dialed his car into drive by the time I was rinsing my mug. My personal phone rang twice. I let it go. Third call, I picked up and put him on speaker. "Nikki." His voice was stretched thin. "This is not funny. Fix it. Fix it now." I merged into traffic. NPR was doing a piece on water infrastructure in rural Georgia. "I would love to help," I said. "But I am suspended, remember, until I apologize to Camille for my unprofessional conduct." The silence on the other end was so complete I thought the call had dropped. Then, "This is insane." "It is actually quite serious," I agreed. "You have clients who cannot access their accounts. You have employees who cannot badge into the building. You have a merger deadline in less than a month. You should probably let Pamela walk you through Section 11. Laura." I had not gone by Laura in 11 years. "Have a good day, Damon," I said. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were steady on the wheel. My heart rate was somewhere around normal. That is what it feels like when you have been ready for something for a very long time. I arrived at TerraCore at 8 o'clock as a vendor, not an employee. The lobby was chaos. Security turnstiles offline, little red lights blinking in a row. A crowd of employees backed up near the elevators. The front desk receptionist, normally unflappable, the kind of woman who managed 3 crises before 9 a.m., was manually logging people in on a paper sheet, her handwriting getting shakier with each entry. "Nikki Carter," I said when I reached her. "I have a meeting with legal." She barely looked up. "Go ahead." I took the stairs. When I reached the executive floor, the scene was worse. Damon's executive assistant was managing 4 phone calls at once, her normally precise appearance starting to fray at the edges. When she saw me, something like relief crossed her face. "Thank God. He's in his office. It is really bad." "I imagine it is," I said. I did not knock. Damon was behind his desk in yesterday's dress shirt, no tie. Around him, Marcus Webb, the CTO, looking like he had been awake since 2 in the morning. 2 IT managers I recognized, both typing furiously on laptops. And Pamela Osi, standing to the side, holding a folder, her expression the careful neutral of someone who had already done the math and did not love the answer. When Damon saw me, his face went through confusion, anger, and then something I had not seen there before, something genuinely small. "You are suspended," he said. "I am here as a vendor," I said, setting my bag on the chair by the door. Pamela stepped forward. "Nathan..." She caught herself. "Damon, we have a significant problem. I know we have a problem. The IP reversion clause from your original operating agreement has been triggered." Her voice was even and precise. "As of 12:01 this morning, all proprietary technology that Nikki personally developed has reverted to her legal ownership. The company's operating license expired when she was suspended without documented cause and without following the arbitration process outlined in the agreement." The blood drained out of Damon's face. "What clause?" he said. Low, almost to himself. "Section 11, subsection C," I said. "You signed it 7 years ago." Marcus, the CTO, made a sound somewhere between a cough and a groan. One of the IT managers stopped typing. The room went to a particular kind of quiet that only happens when everyone in it has just understood something bad at the same time. That cannot be enforceable, Damon said. Pamela opened the folder. I had it reviewed by 2 outside attorneys before 6 this morning. It is notarized, time-stamped, and ironclad. Damon pushed back from his desk and stood up. This is extortion. No, I said. Extortion is when someone threatens to do something harmful unless you pay them. I did not threaten anything. You triggered the clause yourself when you suspended me without cause in front of 200 employees. The system responded exactly as written. Marcus cleared his throat. Sir, if we do not resolve this before noon, we miss the Harmon Group integration deadline. That is $40 million in contracted revenue, plus breach of contract exposure on 3 other client accounts. Damon turned to look at me. His jaw was tight. What do you want? Ownership of the tech division, I said. 40% equity in TerraCore, a board seat reporting directly to the board, not to you, and Camille Reeves escorted out of the building by security within the hour. Absolutely not. I picked up my bag. Then I guess you will be rebuilding your entire security infrastructure from scratch. That should only take 3 or 4 years, assuming you can find someone with my skill set willing to reverse engineer 7 years of undocumented architecture without the original source files. I paused. Good luck with the Harmon Group in the meantime. I started toward the door. Wait, it was Pamela, not Damon. She opened a second folder, placed it on the conference table. Before you go, there is something else. She walked Damon through it quickly. 3 weeks earlier, Camille had filed a provisional patent application listing herself as sole inventor of TerraCore's adaptive threat response framework. Pamela had pulled the filing that morning during her early review. She'd also pulled my original design documentation, timestamped drafts, code commits, meeting records going back to 2021. Pamela had found this independently. I had not asked her to look. She had done it because she was thorough and because she was good at her job. The patent application is fraudulent, she said. If this surfaces during a merger review or a competitor challenge, TerraCore is not just exposed on the IP reversion. We are looking at securities fraud exposure, potential SEC scrutiny, and personal liability for any executive who knew. She looked at Damon steadily. The room went absolutely still. I watched Damon's face, watched the last door close. Whatever argument he had been building dissolved somewhere behind his eyes. He looked around the room. Marcus would not meet his gaze. The IT managers studied the floor. Pamela kept her expression neutral and professional. No one was coming to his rescue. His shoulders dropped. When he spoke again, his voice was different, smaller. Fine, he said. Whatever she needs. Draft the documents. Pamela was already typing. I should not have gone to watch. It was unnecessary. It was a little petty. I will own that. I went anyway. By the time I reached the executive floor workspace, a small crowd had gathered. People pretending to refill their coffee or check the printer, positioned with clear sightlines to Camille's corner office. Through the glass walls, I could see her standing behind her desk, security on one side, Pamela on the other. Her posture was rigid, arms crossed, chin up, the specific body language of someone refusing to accept that they have already lost. Her voice cut through the glass at one point, loud enough to carry, "I have a contract." Pamela's response was quieter, but I saw her open the folder and point to a specific line. The morals clause. Fraudulent conduct. Effective immediately. Camille's eyes swept the room beyond the glass, looking for allies, looking for someone who would step up, looking for Damon. Her gaze landed on mine. We stood there for a long moment. 30 feet of open-plan office between us, 7 years of everything that had happened in this company, and the very clear knowledge that it was over. She mouthed something, 2 words, sharp and deliberate. I did not react. I kept my face still. I looked at her the same way I had looked at the conference room when Damon made his announcement, with the calm of someone who had already decided what was going to happen next. One of the security officers gestured toward the cardboard box on her desk. She packed with efficient, angry movements, not slowly, not dramatically, just fast and sharp, throwing things into the box without caring what bent or broke. At 11:03, she walked out. When she passed me in the hallway, she stopped, just for a breath. "This is not over," she said, quiet enough that only I could hear. I looked at her. "Yes, it is." Security moved her forward. She walked to the elevator without looking back. The doors closed. She was gone. The crowd dispersed in that quick, head-down way people do when they have witnessed something they do not want to be on record having enjoyed. Kezia appeared at my elbow. "That was necessary," I said. She nodded slowly. "People are scared." "Good," I said. "Fear makes people pay attention." At 2 in the afternoon, a company-wide email arrived. I was in my new office. They had moved me into a vacant executive suite within 40 minutes of the documents being signed, and I watched it appear on screens across the open workspace through my glass wall. From Damon Carter, CEO subject, leadership announcement. Effective immediately, Nikki Carter is appointed Chief Technology Officer and Board Director at TerraCore Technologies. Her contributions to the technical foundation of this company have been invaluable, and we are grateful for her leadership in advancing our mission. Please join me in recognizing Nikki's continued role in guiding TerraCore's growth. No mention of the suspension, no acknowledgement of the previous day, no apology for 7 years of erasure. Just careful, sanitized corporate language that covered everything over like fresh paint on a damaged wall. I read it 3 times. Then I set it down and thought, I do not need the apology. I have the equity. I have the board seat. I have full control of the technology that runs every system in this building. The inbox filled immediately. Congratulations from colleagues who had not spoken to me in months. Meeting requests from department heads who had barely acknowledged my existence a week ago. Questions from people who suddenly realized they needed to understand the technical roadmap. I answered the ones that mattered and deleted the rest. Kezia knocked on my open door. Her eyes were bright. "It is official." "It is official," I confirmed. She came in and closed the door. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How long were you planning this?" I thought about the honest answer. I was not planning it. I was protecting myself. Those are different things. She looked at me for a moment. "You had that clause ready. You had documentation going back years. That is not just protection, Nikki. That is strategy." I smiled. "Call it defensive strategy." She laughed. It was the first real laugh I had heard in 2 days. "Whatever you call it. Half the company is going to be terrified of you by Friday." "Good," I said. "Eventually, that turns into respect." My first board meeting was that Friday. Top-floor conference room, mahogany table, leather chairs, and the view of Atlanta that Damon had always loved for the way it made the room feel important. The board members filed in. Renee Caldwell, the venture capitalist who had led the Series B. Harold Ossie, no relation to Pamela, a tech industry veteran with gray at his temples and a reputation for direct questions. Our CFO, James, and 2 others I had worked with only in passing. Damon sat at the head of the table. His posture was correct, his suit pressed, but the room did not fill with him the way it used to. The easy authority was gone. What was left looked like performance. He opened with standard remarks and stumbled almost immediately. Lost his place in the agenda, mixed up 2 line items, had to ask Marcus to clarify a number he should have known cold. When we reached the Harmon Group integration, he fumbled the security audit timeline entirely. Renee Caldwell frowned. "Damon, can you give us the current status of the security compliance documentation? The buyer's team asked specifically about the third-party audit results." A beat of silence. "I can address that," I said. Every head turned. I opened my tablet and walked them through it. The updated security assurance documentation, the redundancy protocols, the audit timeline, the specific deliverables the Harmon team had flagged. I had prepared the night before. It took 11 minutes. When I finished, Harold leaned back in his chair. This is exactly what we needed. Thorough, current, clearly presented. He looked at Damon, then back at me. Why haven't we been hearing from you in these meetings? I met his gaze. Good question. Damon stared at the table. Renee made a note on her legal pad. The board approved the merger unanimously. After the meeting, Renee caught up with me in the hallway. She pulled me into a small alcove near the stairwell. I owe you an apology, she said, keeping her voice low. We should have brought you to the board 2 years ago. Damon kept the leadership structure close, and we let him. You did, I said. She had the grace not to argue. I want you to know we are not going to let that happen again. A pause. There is something else. I almost pulled our funding last spring. The Q1 numbers were soft, and I was not confident in the technical roadmap Damon was presenting. I was quiet. What changed my mind, she said, was a conversation with one of your enterprise clients. They told me the security infrastructure was genuinely best in class, best they had used. I held based on that. She let that sit for a moment. If I had pulled the funding, the company would have been in distress within 60 days. Your IP leverage would not have meant much in that situation. I absorbed this. The margin between the outcome I had built toward and a completely different reality, one where none of it worked, had been narrower than I knew. One investor's conversation with one client, one decision going differently. Thank you for telling me, I said. I thought you should know, Renee said. The fact that your client spoke that highly of the technology, that is why any of this was worth fighting for. She extended her hand. I shook it. Damon came home after 9. I was on the couch reviewing vendor contracts, a glass of red wine on the side table, an old Patrice Rushen album low in the background. He stood in the doorway in his coat for a long moment, looking at me like he was trying to remember something. Happy now? He asked. The bitterness in it was not vicious, just tired. Satisfied, I said. There is a difference. He took off his coat and sat in the armchair across from me, loosened his tie. He looked older than he had looked a week ago, not dramatically, just in the particular way that people look when something inside them has given up holding a certain shape. I underestimated you, he said. Yes, I said. You did. The city hummed outside the windows. A siren rose and faded somewhere to the east. Is this how it's going to be now? He asked. You on the board. Me, what? Reporting to the same board you sit on. You report to the board, I said. Same as you always have. I am just part of that board now. That is not what I mean. I set the contract aside. Then what do you mean, Damon? He ran his hands over his face, laced his fingers behind his head and stared at the ceiling. When he finally looked at me, his eyes were honest in a way they had not been in a long time. I mean us, he said. This marriage? Is there anything left of it? I took a sip of wine. I thought about the honest answer. That depends, I said. Can you actually see me as your equal? Not your wife, not your developer. Your equal. In every room, every decision, every introduction. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked out the window. That was the answer. I did not think so, I said. He stood, walked toward the bedroom. The door closed behind him, quiet and final. I stayed on the couch watching the lights of the city and felt something shift inside me. Not grief exactly. More like the particular stillness that comes after you have stopped pretending something is working. That bedroom door stayed closed that night, and the one after that, and the one after that. Nathan received... No. Damon received the divorce papers on a Thursday. I was at my desk reviewing contracts when Kezia buzzed me. He is here, no appointment, asking if you have a few minutes. I checked my calendar, 20 minutes before my next call. Send him in. He looked like he had not slept well in days, tie loose, shirt slightly wrinkled. He closed my office door carefully like he was afraid of breaking something. Please, he said. Can we talk about this? Sit down, I said. He sat, and he did look smaller. The way people look when the external things that made them feel large have been taken away, and what is left underneath is not quite enough to fill the space. I know I made mistakes, he said. The meeting, Camille, all of it. But we can fix this. Counseling. I can change. Just do not do this. I am not doing this to punish you, I said. Then why? I folded my hands on the desk. Because somewhere along the way you stopped seeing me as your partner. You stopped introducing me as your equal and started treating me like someone you could manage. For years, you let Camille undermine me. You stood by while investors looked through me. You took credit for what I built and acted like my contributions were expected, like I was supposed to show up and do the work while you collected the recognition. I never meant... I know you did not mean it, I said. That is the problem. You did not even notice it was happening. He was quiet for a long time, looking at his hands. What do you want from me? He finally asked. A clean split, I said. You keep the CEO title. I keep my equity and full control of the tech division. We remain co-owners. We do not have to be enemies, Damon. We just cannot be married anymore. Is there anything I can do to change your mind? I looked at him carefully. Can you honestly tell me you see me as your equal? He opened his mouth, closed it, looked away. I did not think so, I said softly. He stood slowly, like his joints ached. At the door he stopped with his hand on the frame. I really did love you, he said. His voice was hoarse. I know, I said, but love is not enough when there is no respect. He left. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. It was cleaner than anyone expected. Damon did not fight the equity split or the tech division ownership. He accepted the terms with the quiet resignation of a man who knows when he has been outplayed. I kept the condo, a 2-bedroom in Midtown with a balcony that looked east over the city. He took the house in Alpharetta that he had always said we needed for the future that had never quite arrived. Within the first month, I rearranged every room, moved the couch to face the windows instead of the television, painted the bedroom a deep, dusty sage that Damon had always said was too dark, hung the art I had bought years earlier and never displayed because he called it too abstract, bought soft white linen sheets and sheer curtains that let the morning light in. Little by little, the condo stopped being our space. It became mine. At work, I moved fast. I hired 3 new senior engineers in the first 6 weeks. Not the credentialed but cautious candidates HR usually pushed, but young, hungry people with unconventional paths. A kid from Albany who had taught himself distributed systems architecture on YouTube. A woman who left her PhD program because she wanted to build things rather than theorize about them. A former gaming developer who saw security vulnerabilities the way a chess player sees threats, 3 moves out. They trusted me, not because of my title, because I knew the work and I did not pretend otherwise. I launched 2 projects that had been stuck in committee for almost a year, reorganized the team structure to reward output over hierarchy. The culture changed fast and visibly. Kezia stopped by my office one afternoon and watched me for a moment. You look different, she said. I am not carrying as much, I said. The divorce? Among other things. She nodded. For what it is worth, I think you made the right call. You seem like yourself again. I thought about that on the drive home, whether she was right, whether this was myself again or a self I had finally gotten around to building. I decided it did not matter which. Either way, I liked her. About 8 months after the divorce was finalized, Kezia buzzed me during lunch. There is a Marcus Webb on the line. Says you do not know him, but hopes you will take the call. He is with Sentinel Systems. I had heard of Sentinel, small cybersecurity startup out of Charlotte, making a name for itself with some genuinely innovative authentication protocols. Smart people doing interesting work. Put him through, I said. Marcus Webb had the kind of voice that did not waste time. Direct, specific, no preamble. Ms. Carter, thank you for taking the call. I've been following your technical work for about 2 years. The security architecture you built is the best I have seen in this industry, and I mean that specifically, not as a pitch. Thank you, I said. I want to discuss a partnership, not a licensing deal, a real partnership. Your architecture as the technical foundation, my team building the next layer of intelligent threat response on top of it, revenue share, 15% equity in Sentinel, and a seat on our technical board. I leaned back in my chair. Why not build your own architecture? Because they would not be you, he said. I have watched how you think. You anticipate 3 moves ahead. That is rare. I have hired smart people. None of them do what you do. We met 3 days later at a coffee shop in Midtown. He was younger than I expected. Early 30s, jeans, and a blazer over a t-shirt that said, "Encrypt everything" in small block letters. He had the energy of someone who had already decided where they were going and was mainly curious about who was coming with them. We talked for 2 hours about security models, about the direction of cyber threats over the next decade, about what it meant to build a company where the technical work was treated as the actual center of gravity, not the pitch deck. When we stood to leave, I shook his hand. "Send me the term sheet," I said. "I am interested." He grinned. "You will not regret this." I believed him. About a year after I joined Sentinel's board, TerraCore held one of its quarterly networking mixers, the kind where people wear company lanyards and drink warm wine and pretend to enjoy the ambient jazz. I saw Damon near the windows. He was alone, which was unusual. He had lost some weight. There were new lines around his eyes. He was holding a glass of something amber and looking out at the city with the particular stillness of someone thinking about a question they had not answered yet. I walked over. "Congratulations on Sentinel," he said when I approached. "The press coverage has been significant." "Thank you," I said. "The team did good work." He nodded, swirled his drink, a long pause. "I have been thinking about stepping down," he said, "from TerraCore. Maybe it is time." I looked at him carefully. There was no performance in it, no fishing for reassurance, just a man who had been running on a definition of himself for a long time and was starting to wonder if that definition still fit. "What would you do?" I asked. "I do not know yet. Consult, maybe, travel. Figure out who I am when I am not the CEO. He laughed quietly. "Turns out I have been that title for so long, I'm not sure how much is underneath it." "There is something underneath it," I said. "You just have not looked yet." He glanced at me. Something in his face shifted. "I always believed I was the visionary," he said. "The one with the ideas, but you were the one who actually built it." "Yes," I said. "I was." He accepted that without flinching. That was new. "I am sorry it took me so long to see it," he said. "Me too," I said. He finished his drink, set the glass on the window ledge. "For what it's worth," he said, "I am glad you are doing well. You deserve it." He walked away before I could respond, disappearing into the crowd of people exchanging business cards and career updates. I watched him go. I felt something I had not expected. Not satisfaction, not vindication. More like a quiet, clear-eyed understanding of what had been lost on both sides. He had wasted years of his own potential being a man who needed to be the biggest person in the room. That was not a comfortable thing to live inside. I finished my wine and went home. Sentinel Systems launched Sentinel Guard in the spring. The press response was not what any of us had planned for. It was bigger. TechCrunch called it a generational shift in enterprise security architecture. Wired ran a long feature on the underlying framework. Forbes put out a piece under the headline, "Nikki Carter, From Corporate Shadow to Industry Pioneer." My name was on the work. In print, in keynote programs, in the podcast requests that Kezia had started managing because there were too many to handle alone. "You are going to need a communications person," she told me one morning, scrolling through interview requests on her tablet. "One thing at a time," I said. She had followed me to Sentinel 6 months after I joined, showed up in my office one afternoon and said, "Wherever you go, I go. You are the best boss I have ever had, and I refuse to break that streak." I had laughed for the first time in weeks. 3 months after the launch, I gave a keynote at a tech conference in Austin, standing room only in a ballroom that held 800 people. The questions after were specific and engaged, the kind you only get when the audience has actually read the work. I came off the post-presentation high with a glass of sparkling water and started working through the room. That is when I saw Camille. She was across the ballroom near a display booth for a startup I did not recognize. Polished as always, tailored blazer, perfect posture, but there was something strained around her eyes, a tightness that had not been there when she had the full weight of TerraCore's resources behind her. I watched her work the small crowd around the booth. The gestures were animated and practiced. The smile was bright, but the energy was different. The confidence that had read as dominance in TerraCore's conference rooms now read as effort. The startup was struggling. Anyone in the industry long enough could read it. After the crowd dispersed, she was left adjusting materials on the display table with slightly too much focus. I walked over, she turned, and for a half second, genuine surprise crossed her face. Then the professional mask came back up. "Nikki. Cool, controlled. I saw your keynote was well attended. Congratulations." "Thank you," I said. "Your presentation looked interesting." We stood in that particular awkward space that exists between two people who were once enemies and are trying to determine whether they still are. Finally, she said, "I underestimated you." I took a sip of water. "Yes, you did." She was quiet for a moment. "Nathan, Damon too. We both did." "I know," I said. She looked at me and something shifted in her expression, something that took a moment to identify. Respect. Not performance, not strategy, actual respect. "You won," she said. I shook my head. I did not win. I stopped losing. "Those are different things." She considered that. Then she extended her hand. "For what it is worth," she said, "I am sorry about the patent application, about the way I treated you. You were better than I gave you credit for." I shook her hand. Apology accepted. She picked up her bag. "I should get going. Early flight." "Good luck with the startup," I said. "I will need it," she said, a real smile that time, small and honest. She walked away into the crowd and I watched her go and felt nothing complicated, no anger, no triumph, just the particular lightness of someone who has finally set down something they had been carrying for too long. I finished my water and pulled out my phone. There was a text from Marcus. New client call confirmed for Monday. Also, the Series B term sheet is ready. Call me when you land. I typed back, landing at 8. Talk then. I looked out at the ballroom, the branded hoodies and venture capital optimism and people building things, breaking things, starting over. I was one of them now. Not the woman in the footnotes. Not the invisible architect, just Nikki Carter, building what was mine. I put my phone away and went to find a cab. There was work to do in the morning, and this time, every bit of it was mine. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.